Welcome, everybody. We have 39 people registered for today's event, which is fantastic. So you will see a few people joining us. I'm just admitting a few more now. My name's Kelly, and I'm the Australasian Learning and Development Manager for AHI. And so most of you are part of our membership, which is wonderful. So it's fantastic to see some faces here. So I'd now like to do a soft intro, Zoe. You'll talk way more about your accolades in a better way than what I will. So I'd like to introduce you now to Zoe Routh, who's just an absolute inspiration in the field of mentorship and leadership, and of course today's conversations about executive structures. So Zoe, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. What a joy to be here, everyone. I'm so delighted that so many of you have got such an interest in this topic. I am extremely passionate about helping leaders and teams become highly performing entities, elite performers, in fact. Now, before we get into the juicy details, a couple of things. First one, I want to acknowledge the land on which I present to you. Let me start that over. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which I stand, which is Ngunnawal country here in Canberra, and pay my respect to the elders past, present, and emerging. I also want to say a big hello and acknowledge the people from New Zealand all across the ditch there. Nice to see you guys. Have such a strong bond with New Zealand. I've been there a couple of times, just absolutely love it. And the third thing is to say hello to all of our Sydney friends who are facing down another couple of weeks probably of lockdown. So hearts go out to you, and we are with you, and hopefully this will keep you entertained and at least get the brain cogs going while all that other COVID stuff happens. So that's a little bit of first things first. Second things are, you're probably wondering, what the is that accent? If you guessed Canadian, gold star for you. I was imported from Canada in 1996, which is land of lakes, rivers, and maple syrup. We handled COVID particularly well because for years and years, we've had a stockpile reserve of maple syrup. True story. And one year it got stolen. That was devastating. So no matter what happens with COVID, we had the pancakes covered. All right, so what we're talking about today is elite teams. We're going to look at a model that can map where your particular team is and the journey to elite performance. So we're going to do a big overview diagnostic type of activity with you. Feel free to use the chat box. You can talk to each other. You can also ask questions there. Now, if you want me to pay attention to the questions, best thing to put is a Q and then your question. That way, when I have a look at your comments, I can see what's a question and what's just a sharing amongst each other. So feel free to share your wisdom and insights and as we go along, because all of you are seasoned leaders and it's great to share that expertise. Okay, so a little bit about moi, apart from being Canadian. So you have an understanding of the person who is spruiking all this goodness for you. Now, I can't see a darn thing. Oh, there we go. I have my glasses. Here we go. So into a few slides. I'm not going to do all slides. I've got the whiteboard here as well for going old school. So a little bit more about me. Here I am on the Larapinta Trail just outside of Alice Springs, airing my armpits as you always do at the top of a mountain. Now, why do I share this with you? Two reasons. One is that with big views, you get big insights. Quite literally, you do. What happens when we get up and get above the clouds, so to speak, so that we can see the territory around us, our brain changes. The frontal lobe activity decreases, and that allows us to have a sense of connection and wonder and awe. And in that state, that's where new and innovative ideas appear. So doing this kind of activity is a metaphorical climb up a mountain. So when we do this kind of webcast learning, it's like rising above and having a look at the big picture. So that's what we want to do today. The other reason I share this slide is that it showcases a little bit of my background. I'm an outdoorsy chick by background. In Canada, I led canoe trips for 9 summers and headed up the out-tripping canoe tripping program there. All through Northwest Ontario, I led canoe trips, and it was my first introduction to high-performing teams and when teams don't go so well. There's nothing like bad weather to bring out bad moods, I can tell you that much. From my job leading canoe trips in Canada, I came out here to Australia and I worked at Outward Bound Australia, in fact, and I was there for 9 years, doing similar types of activities all across this land in different states and territories, all about learning how to help people discover more about themselves and how they can interact as teams. So I learned about team dynamics in this country in a different way as well. And then my third job before I started full-time in my own business was with the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. And there I learned how to blend boardroom leadership training with actual experiential education, which I've been doing for 20 years. And across all of those areas and all of these different contexts, I learned that there are similar patterns in terms of people dynamics. And I looked at the different trends that help bring teams together and what sends them apart. Me personally, I thought I was a pretty good leader. I thought, in my 20s, I got this thing nailed. My teams love me. I love them. This team leadership stuff, hey, it's easy. And then, of course, I had one of those awakening moments where things did not go so well. The team was not so great, and I realized I was not so awesome as a leader. So I'm sure all of you can attest, those lessons are hard won, and I learned a lot about what not to do. And the incident that I remember in particular was when I thought I was leading a really substantial team, and one of the people I was leading basically undermined my authority, challenged my ideas, led kind of a coup in some ways to overthrow my structure of the team and the way that we should focus on things. I lost all sorts of confidence around being able to lead a team as a result. And I thought about this quite a lot. Like, what is it that causes these kind of eruptions in team dynamics? What is it that causes a team to implode? And what also makes a great high-performing team? So I learned a lot about that whole incident. And a lot of it was to do with having strong boundaries and strong structure in a team, something we'll talk about more in the second webcast. So I'm sure all of you have had pretty difficult experiences as well as leaders. What I'd love for you to do is in the chat box, if you have a burning question that you'd like answered about leading elite high-performing teams, that would be terrific. Put it in the chat box and I'll see to make sure that we cover off, if I can, on your burning questions, either in this session or in the next two. So in the chat box, what is your question that you have that you would love answered about leading high-performing teams? All right. So as you do that, I want to showcase some of the other high-performing teams I've had the pleasure of assisting, and to give you a little bit of an overview of what the patterns are. Okay. So this is a snapshot of some of the organizations I've worked with. They're really quite diverse. Everything from agriculture, as you can see, Australian pork and rice and dairy, as well as higher education in different universities, a lot of not-for-profits I've worked with, some government agencies, commercial enterprises that are online retail and marketing, even services like Suez. So across all of these very diverse businesses, the common patterns are the same. Leaders always want to do a good job. Leaders question if they are doing a good job. And three, there's nothing more difficult than the people stuff of leadership. That is some of the most confronting stuff that we have. When I asked the leader what they find easiest or hardest about leadership, easiest often was strategy, because it's all in your head. And then the people stuff was the hardest. Why? Why does people stuff have to be so difficult? And I think it doesn't have to be. I think when we learn to read the maps of people dynamics, we can manage the people. So when you know the maps, you can manage the people. And one of the key things that we're going to do across these 3 webinars is I'm going to give you a couple of different maps to understand the territory of human dynamics so that you can read your way through the wilderness of leadership and people stuff. Okay, now I'm going to check the chat box and see what questions, if you have any yet, about elite team performance that you want answered. No, so far nothing. You guys are open to learning. Ha! That means I can feed you whatever I think you need. Okay. So with that, let's start off with some research I did around trends that are affecting leaders and teams when it comes to elite high performance. And this research was McKinsey, good old McKinsey, did some very extensive research about, especially through the pandemic, some of the trends that are affecting leaders. And the key things for employee experience in particular that employees and employers were wrestling with were stability. No surprise there, right? How destabilized have we felt through the pandemic? Yeah, so when we have that much uncertainty, people tend to want certainty and stability. So anything we could do as leaders to create that, even if it was to say, this is what we know and this is what we don't know, and that's as good as it gets, that's something. That's like a mini little life raft in the sea of uncertainty. So stability and a little bit more certainty is definitely a key theme. Trusting relationships was another. Of course, this is a security blanket, right? So when we feel our environment has gone topsy-turvy like it has, having really strong relationships was a key tether for us.
Good, how are you?
If you could mute yourself, that would be terrific. Otherwise I get confused. I'm like, I lose my flow. All right. Except if you do have a question and I'm in flow and you want it answered, just please unmute yourself and ask the question. That's the other time you can unmute yourself. That would be terrific too. Third thing that was really important for leaders and teams through this time is inclusion and fairness. This is a longer trend outside of the pandemic. This idea of who's at the table and how can we get more people at the table so we can hear their perspective and feel like they belong is one of the critical factors that is sort of like baseline for creating high performing teams. People got to feel like they're included and that they belong. Those two things are slightly different. So those two things are really essential. And the fourth thing is having a sense of purpose and wanting to make a contribution. That's like the North Star across the sea that you're sailing of uncertainty. Oh, what a lovely metaphor picture I just painted for you there. So with that, let's have a look at some of the things that we need to be mindful of with some of this research and some key tips for you so you can get started right away on this journey to high performance. McKinsey found that there was a 23.7% increase in work effectiveness with trust in leadership. With trust in leadership. Wow. That's kind of sad and kind of scary and kind of interesting all at the same time. So just by building trust, we get 23.7 increase of work effectiveness. It's not surprising though, when we do think about the crisis of trust and leadership that we are undergoing right now. The Edelman Trust Barometer that came out at the beginning of last year, so right before the major upswing of the pandemic, had a look at institutions in Australia and the public's perception of them. And it found that no institution was ranked as trustworthy. Now there's two things that give us trustworthiness according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. One of them is competency and the other one is ethics. So it found that not-for-profits were seen as highly ethical, but not competent. It saw corporations as competent, but not ethical. And neither ethical nor competent were government and media. So how do you gain trust in leadership? How do you build trust in your people? One of the ways that you do that is, not surprisingly, is to communicate more. So if you can communicate, that's a really important lesson. You can't over communicate on different platforms, especially if your teams have gone hybrid or remote. The more communication you have, the better. And the second thing is to be as transparent as possible about what's going on. The third way you build trust is repeated positive experiences, and something that we're going to talk about next week in our next webcast. All right, so that's trust and leadership and its huge impact on work effectiveness. How about this one? 55.5 increase in employee engagement with non-financial recognition. Wow, so if you want your people to feel engaged, one simple, cost-effective way to do it is just to say, good on you. Congratulations, what a great job you did on this particular project. I really appreciate your participation and contribution to X, Y, and Z. That simple acknowledgement and recognition of contribution sends employee engagement scores through the roof. So simple, right? And so easy. So I love that. And 55.5 increase is huge score. So let's look at this third piece. There's a 52.3% increase in well-being with fairness, with a sense of fairness. And job and financial security improved this by 53.3%. Now, what is fairness? It's all in the eye of the beholder. So that's one of the challenges with that. So how do we do that? How do you address this one? You need to sit down and talk with each of your staff members and ask them what they think is fair and try and understand from their point of view what fairness is all about. Because it's likely, or not likely, it's possible, it's quite different than your sense of fairness. All right, so your tasks to help leverage off some of these trends and insights are to communicate, to be transparent as possible, to acknowledge people, and to have conversations with them about what they think is fair. It doesn't always lead to great solutions though, if their sense of fairness is different to yours. Yet, when we do listen to people and they feel like they are being heard, even if they don't get what they ultimately want, this goes a long way in building up the relationship bank account with your people. All right, so those are your first handy dandy tips about how to do things better and to build elite high performance. Just a few fundamentals based on some research. There's a couple of myths I want to dispel also about high performing teams. One, the myth is it's all about the leader. Whoops, did I stop sharing? I did not stop sharing. There you go. So one of the myths is having a high performing team is all about the leader. So when you have a great leader, you have a high performing team. Not quite. You can have a great leader and a terrible team. Chances are if you have a great leader, you might have a great team, but it's not all about the leader. It's often about the system you have in place for leading and managing your team, as well as the skills that they have. So systems and skill work in an integrated fashion with the leader themselves. And quite often with high performing teams, the leadership role changes. Sometimes you have official authority, and then authority and delegation can switch around. So you need to have really good systems and really good skills in order to enable that high performance. So it's not always just about the leader. That's myth number one. Myth number two, some people say that you have to hire for culture fit. The challenge with this is that when you hire to fit somebody into your culture, you run the danger of running into a monochrome culture. Everybody's just like everyone else. And when you lack diversity of perspective, of experience, of backgrounds, you miss out on innovation opportunities. So you want to hire not so much for culture fit, but for two other things. For values fit. So do you have the same values as us as a company? And you don't necessarily have the same personality or work approach than we do, but the same values is important. And the second thing is to hire for contribution to culture. What is it that you can bring and add to the culture? So I like this idea of adding to the culture, not just keeping it the same. So that's another myth to dispel about high performance. The third one about high performing teams is the idea that high performance is just about drive, just like this mono focus of going hell for leather for one end goal. That's not entirely true. So high performers don't just operate in fifth gear. They actually can use their entire gearbox. They know when to go into neutral. They know when to slow right down to first gear. So high performance is all about knowing how and which gears to pick in terms of driving your high performance. It's not just about hell for leather, let's go for it. So that's a couple of the key myths right there. So let's unpack a little bit of your journey let's unpack your journey to elite high performance. And behind me, I have a handy dandy flip chart. Going old school for you. I don't know what accent that was. Slightly Canadian, slightly British. My dad's British, my mom's Canadian. Who knows? Okay, so in this model, there's two axes that we need to pay attention to. One, the vertical axis is around culture cohesion. So do you have less cohesion or more cohesion with your team? And what does cohesion mean? That means how bonded are you? How well do you like each other and know each other and get along? So that team harmony piece is really important. And so that's one of the first ways to evaluate where your team is in high performance. On the horizontal axis, this is all about strategic skills. How developed are your skills as a team? Well, is each team members? Do they have the leadership fundamentals covered as well as the advanced leadership thinking skills? And how much can they see the bigger picture? So on the left, we have less strategic thinking ability, and on the right, more strategic thinking ability. Okay, so that's where we start off with. So when we have low cohesion and not much skills, our team is what we call novices. Novices. Yeah. So the novice teams, what is that like for you as a leader? Well, you're going to be spending a lot of time doing one-on-ones with people. One-on-ones to build up their confidence and their skill and their ability in their particular role, as well as trying to welcome them into the team. So there's a lot of attention from you as a leader with your novice and novices. You might have a collection of people who are some novices and some more experienced. So a novice team, it's very, like everybody's a novice, then it's quite busy for you. There might be for the team members a lot of confusion. How does the job work? How does the team work? How does the organization work? How do we figure this all out? There might also, because everybody's kind of newish, a bit of jostling for position, a little bit of trying to figure out the pecking order type of thing. This is the standard process for forming teams. You're trying to figure out who's who at the zoo. And you're going to spend a lot of time hand-holding as a leader at this point. So this is what it's like. There's quite a few risks if you do nothing in particular well with this team. And the risks are prima donna. So the sort of like jostling for position can lead to, I'm the self-important one amongst the team. So it becomes all about me. You might have lone wolves, which are similar to prima donnas, but they're just like, screw everyone else. I'm just going to zero in on what I need to do and look after myself because there's no cohesion there. And the other one is turtles, where people shrink into themselves because they don't know where they fit and how they belong. So prima donnas, lone wolves, and turtles are some of the risks here. Now, huge amount of opportunity with your team is sitting in novice. The opportunity is they can learn and grow, and they can learn how to live and work together. Maybe they do live together. I worked and lived with my teams at Outward Bound and at summer camp, but probably not the case for many. It might be some of the case with some of you as well. Anyway, work together. They can learn how to work together better, so that opportunity for team cohesion is there. And absolutely, they can learn more about their own role as well as how to operate as a leader across the organization. So novices is the first stage. A lot of work for you to do as a leader here, a lot more hands-on. Now, if you increase the team cohesion, and if the skills aren't so up to speed, we call these amateurs. And amateurs, this is a fun place to be actually, because people are getting along. It's a bit of all care, no responsibility, plenty of fun. There's a bit of gung-ho-ness, a bit of cavalierness. There's may also be, because of that, and because they haven't got a lot of leadership skills yet, a bit of ducking and weaving, a bit of masking, a lack of knowledge and competence, a bit of hiding, dodging. So there is a little bit of risk. There's quite a bit of risk here, actually. So the risks, if you don't do anything with your amateur team, is that it can lead to ass covering. It can lead to being blind to mistakes, and can lead to unproductivity. New word. Non-productivity, unproductiveness. Not being productive, in other words. Because they're having fun, but they don't necessarily have accountability or the skill to pull things off. So a lot of stuff can go under the covers here. There is a huge opportunity though. Because you have good team cohesion, they can actually grow and learn together. So there's less of the sharp elbows rivalry thing that can happen at both novices and this one over here. So you can have the opportunity for them to learn and come together and galvanize and really move the organization forward that way. So your job here, dealing with amateurs, is less about facilitating group dynamics and more about education. Let's get these people upskilled in their job and as a team. Okay, so if we work on our leadership skills but don't have a lot of team cohesion, what's interesting is this sounds like a good thing. You have a group of stars. So people who are technically competent in their own role, but not necessarily fabulously working well together. And this is one of the big challenges for leaders these days, is actually how do you get your teams to get along? You might have a team of stars, but not a star team. And this is what we want. A star team is elite performers, which we'll get to in a moment. So stars working pretty well on their own. One of the things that we find is that can result in silos in the organization. There might be a bit of competitiveness with each other as the executives tend to eye each other off and just look after their own patch. A little bit of jealousy and that kind of stuff can happen. They can be highly productive in their own area and knowledgeable in their own area, but not about their neighbors, and that can cause problems for you as the chief. Okay, so the risks here. This is where you tend to have a lot of the people dynamics come into play in some ways. I see this a lot, and it comes up in my book, The Four Devils of People Stuff. When we talk about interpersonal dynamics, it often happens here because of the jealousy, because of people feeling confident in their roles. They become more sensitive to organizational issues, well, through their own particular lens. You can have power struggles here, and this is the risk runs of culture implosion at stars. It's sad but true. It has the most potential and also the most potential to fall apart. The opportunity, though, is that if you do start to build their cohesion, you can shift them into becoming an elite team. Elite team, which is when you have really solid leadership skills as well as great team cohesion. There you go. So what's the opportunity? What does leading an elite team look like? This is where your executive are whole of organization oriented, so they can rise above the parapet and see what's going on across the whole organization. They're proactive in creating solutions that affect not just their own area, but everybody's area for the collective benefit. They can create redundancy in the system because they can look after each other's area. So if Frank wants to go on leave, Susan can look after his area without too much of an impost. Likewise, you can go on leave because one of your team members can step in and look after the organization. So it creates redundancy in the system. So everything doesn't have to come back and rely on you as the head of the team or head of the organization, which is an enormous burden to bear as a leader. You don't want to have to carry the can for everybody all the time. Like, that's just incredibly draining. So what are the risks here? Because it sounds all fantastic, right? The risks, there's a couple of them. One, if you have really high performers that are executing really well, where do they go next? You're sitting at the top of the responsibility tree. Do they want your job? If they can't get your job, do they leave? And this is one of the risks of having an elite high-performing team. Now, I interviewed a wonderful leader on my podcast. His interview comes out next week on my show. And he talked about not being afraid of doing yourself out of a job, meaning that his focus as a leader is always about elevating the people around him so that he can make himself obsolete in his role, with the trust that he can continue to grow and create opportunities for himself and for the organization. So as he grows and expands his abilities and his contributions, so does everybody else around him if he's doing both. So he elevates himself as well as the people around him. And that's exactly what you should be thinking about if you have an elite team. Is like, how do you elevate your own leadership skills and abilities and opportunities while simultaneously lifting up other people around you? So that's one of the risks, is that unless you create that space for people to grow, they're going to go. That was a rhyme I didn't even plan. That's awesome. The other couple of risks with elite teams are about you. Like, you might get to this and everybody's doing an ace job. There's redundancy in the system. You're like, what do I do? And you could end up being a block as the leader there. And you might become jealous of their achievements and find yourself being at a loose end and trying to figure out where to from here. So orientation into growth and opportunity for yourself as well as for others is the critical secret for here. Okay, so I want to check in the chat box, where is your team on this model? Are you novice, star, amateurs, or elite? So you might have a couple people in different areas there, but overall, where's the center of gravity of your team? What would you call them? So feel free to pop that into the chat box. I'd love to get a sense of where people are up to with their teams. Okay, Megan says amateurs. We have a lot of stars, says Joe. That's good. Amateurs are good, stars are good. Kelly's got a combination. Or she's giving the tip for everybody. Stars. Okay, cool. Fantastic. Stars, yeah. Yeah, so for those who are having stars, I'm just going to change my view so I can see the folks who got videos on. For those who have stars, how many of you are experiencing that sort of silos and rivalry stuff? If you are experiencing that, give me a thumbs up. Silos, rivalries, okay, a couple maybe. All right, or maybe you guys are just sailing all through and you're ready and willing to step into elite teams. Okay, fantastic. Interesting that most of the people either have amateurs or stars. Not very few have novices or elite. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. So let's talk about the journey of where you are and to how to get to elite teams. And we'll start with novices, even though hardly anybody's got a novice team. Where you want to go next is you want to go to amateurs before you go to elite. You don't want to go novices to stars because you miss out on the opportunity of building the cohesion that creates the rivalries later. So if you have the opportunity, you want to build your novice team and build on team cohesion first. So what do you do when you're building team cohesion? Is that you are getting to know each other. You are doing personality profiles or behavior profiles or doing any kind of profile at all. There's a whole bunch of them that I recommend. And here's a few that you may be aware of. I love DISC as a behavior preference profiling tool. Why do I love it? It's because behavior is adaptable. So it's less pigeonholing than some of the other profiles. It's easy to read and understand tool, so people get it really immediately and can remember it. Unlike Myers-Briggs, which people get, but hard to remember 16 different profiles. In 4, there's just 4 main ones. Easy to remember. So this is a really easy way to get people to understand themselves better and also their colleagues and how they can work better together. So doing a profiling instrument like that is really, really helpful. In fact, in Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is a fable about a CEO who walks into an organization and has a dysfunctional executive team and what she does to help put them on the track to high performance. And one of the things she does is run profiling instruments to take them on a team retreat so they can get to know the people that they're working with. It's amazing how little we know about each other on executive teams. I had this leader tell me this story once where he worked side by side with someone for 10 years, 10 years, before he found out that his colleague had actually arrived into Australia by boat as a refugee, fleeing huge war in his home country. He had no idea. He had no idea that this gentleman next to him had such a story to tell, because he was just a quiet achiever and didn't go around telling him his life story every day. So these are, how does that matter in terms of your team performance? When you start to learn about people, you develop a sense of intimacy with them, which creates that sense of trust and belonging. You start to see each other as humans, not just automatons that are pushing buttons and getting stuff to happen. So this team cohesion piece is really super important at all stages of the leadership journey, all stages of the group journey, and particularly important for novices. Because this is how you sort of break down the pecking order challenges, so to speak, so that people feel safe being able to voice their opinions. They feel safe contributing. They know where they fit. They know that they have a place where they feel included and also a place where they belong. So this people stuff, this touchy-feely stuff, is really critical. So that's your big move from novices to amateur. The only time where you want to go novices to star is in a crisis situation. And you might be in the middle of a restructure, which has got a big spill and fill, and everybody's kind of like, bleeding from the experience. And so in which case you need to have, right, let's batten down the hatches and the hutches. If you have rabbits, batten those down, and you get really clear on roles, responsibilities, and deliverables because you're in a crisis situation. Ironically, as you go through and deal with a crisis situation, it also creates a sense of bonding. So you can actually hit two birds with one stone in this way. And so as long as you come back to the get to know you stuff later. There's nothing like adversity that can help bond people together. And we saw this a lot at the beginning of the pandemic when teams really came together. It's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they rode that adrenaline for a month or two in terms of like, right, this is what we need to do. And they prioritized things well together, and they executed strategy and dealt with the tough stuff together. And it overrode any of the like past quibbles, etc. in teams. And they just really felt connected through the crisis. Crisis ebbed, or we got used to it. And guess what? The same little cracks started to appear. So even though they did this, let's move to high performance, they still had to address the team cohesion piece down the track. All right, so that's when you want to go novices to stars, is when you're in a particular crisis. Otherwise, the journey is novice, amateur to elite. So whether you're going novices to stars or amateurs to elite, it's the same strategy in terms of what you need to get your leaders to do. The first thing you need to assess is, where is your team on the leadership fundamentals? Are they able to manage their own time well? Are they able to delegate effectively? Can they coach others properly? Can they give effective feedback? Can they have the difficult conversations? These leadership fundamentals are crucial for them managing their own teams as well as interacting with each other. So the leadership fundamentals absolutely need to be nailed. And the second thing that needs to be addressed is advanced leadership skills. Advanced leadership skills. Now, what are the advanced leadership skills? There's 4 main areas that you need to consider. And by the way, if you're madly scribbling, after this particular webinar, I will send out through Kelly 2 handouts. One is a checklist assessment for leadership fundamentals. Another one is a checklist for advanced leadership skills. So it has all the detail in it. I'm just going high level for you right now. So the advanced leadership skills include things like leading culture, leading strategy, leading performance, and leading change. Those are the 4 biggies that you need to master to get your teams either from novice to stars or amateurs to elite. So those fundamentals and advanced leadership thinking are the big things that you need to address. Okay, if you're going from stars to elite, the 2 things that need to happen. One is about culture cohesion, getting to know each other. You also want to build in the redundancy piece. So the redundancy piece is all about getting to know each other's portfolios, if you like. So it's about doing a day in the life of each other. And you could do this in a couple of different ways. One of the ways is that one of your meetings, put aside a segment where you have one of your executive team walk through what a typical day looks like, what a typical week looks like, what the challenges are in that particular area, and what they need to focus on in terms of priorities. So you get to know each other's areas quite well. You can also do shadowing at this point. So you can have one leader shadow the other into their area for an hour or 2, and that way get more familiar with the ins and outs of their responsibilities. There's nothing like building empathy by figuring out, oh my goodness, I thought I had a tough job. They got a tough job. So by building up that interaction is really, really helpful for people to get a sense of what their colleagues are doing. A really important way to get an overview effect of the organization, to elevate their leadership skills across the organization, not just for their silo, is to do something is called a results map. And this is based on Stacy Barr's work. Stacy Barr is S-T-A-C-E-Y. Barr is B-A-R-R. And you can find her work at stacybarr.com. She's a key performance specialist, and in her methodology with coming up with measures, she has this step in her process called developing a results map. And it's a way of articulating all the resorts, wouldn't that be nice? We have all these resorts, all the results in an organization and how they fit together in one place on this map. It kind of looks like a bullseye, and you have the different functions of the organization, all of their results and how they interconnect and how they feed across the organization. And it does a couple of things. One, it sees how important everybody's work is to the collection of the whole. Two, it shows people where they fit within the organization. Three, it gives people a big picture understanding of the business. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done. It's a systems map. And the way that you can develop that, a couple of steps, quick tips for you. Thank you for putting that in, Kelly. God, you're fast. Getting the link in for Stacy Barr's stuff. Just Google results map on her blog, and she's got some excellent examples and explanations of it. When you're doing your results map, what I get people to do first of all, when they're doing this for themselves, is to brainstorm or list all the processes that you have in your organization. Things like marketing, sales, registration, client service, finance, client delivery. I think I said that. So you have a big long list of those, and then you can draw them and see how they interact with each other. with at the center of your map is the interaction with your clients, the actual service delivery. So you do a process map first, and then you can do a results map. This takes a little bit more to explain, so just go to Stacy Barr there. But you'll get an idea of how to mind map your whole organization on one page. So what I find when I do this with people is that they get the insight that you have as CEO. And you didn't have to beat them over the brow with like, why don't you guys think more strategically? Well, here's how. You can draw the organization out. And when you do this results map, when you do this kind of mapping, what I find, it also showcases where the friction points are in the organization. It could be between departments. It could be externally. And it also shows you where the hubs and nodes are. Where are the important pieces that cause a lot of chain reactions in terms of outcomes, and is that working effectively? So it's a nice diagnostic tool as well as a way of building people's skills up. So that's results mapping. So we've had shadowing, we've had results mapping are two of the activities that you can do there to help expand your team of stars into a star team. And doing stuff like going on leadership retreats or team retreats is really, really great at any of those stages to develop the team cohesion. When you break bread with your colleagues, you become more human. Does that even make sense? You see each other more of the human side of each other. And when you see more of the human side of each other, it lowers your competitiveness streak and builds your empathy and compassion connection piece. When you do that, that is actually one of the conditions for creating high group flow creative experiences. So you cannot be a highly creative dynamic team if you have this sort of like threat barriers in place. You need to actually have that down, those threat responses dialed right down. And how do you do that? Getting to know each other. All right, so where are we up to? Mistakes. Mistakes, things to avoid. Let me see, I have this on a slide for you. I think I do. Yes. First of all, I want to show you the journey from novice to elite in 1 year time frame, what you'd be looking at, and then you can cherry pick out of this what you might consider doing for your team. So here's your game plan for novice to elite in 1 year. Ta-da-da! First, work on your cohesion, your team identity and mission retreat. First is building your culture compass. This is all about your vision, the results that you're trying to produce, the people you serve, and the behaviors that you are acceptable and not acceptable to you. The group ground rules, if you like. And the culture compass I've outlined in great detail in my third book, Loyalty. And you can have access to that at some point. So your culture compass is really, really useful. Doing profiles, as I mentioned, doing get to know you activities and an introduction to strategy so that people have an understanding of like, this is not just about kumbaya, this is about actually getting down to the nitty gritty of delivering work. Then you build your skills. You do leadership fundamentals, you work on results that people are accountable to, the KPIs, and you do lots and lots of one-on-ones to build up people's skills. Then you leverage those skills. You start building the advanced leadership skills. You get them to stretch their identity and sense of contribution by doing 25-year visioning. That sounds pretty expansive, right? Like when we do strategic planning, it's usually 1 to 3 years. It's like 1 to 3 years. Oh my God. What if you had a 25-year time frame? How do you show up like that? And what you find is that the possibilities expand and your sense of purpose expands, your sense of ripple effect expands. This is all elite team focus, by the way. And shadowing, as I mentioned. So that's your novice to elite, your 1-year plan. So cherry pick whatever you need to out of that, given where your team is at the moment. So let's talk about mistakes. Dun, dun, dun. You assume the team knows what high performance is. Your picture of high performance might differ from theirs. Chances are, if they're a team of stars, their idea of high performance is getting their own unit working well. Their idea of high performance across the board isn't necessarily a key focus for them. So you need to work with them to get crystal clear about what high performance actually looks like and sounds like. Is it creative and dynamic? Is it being innovative? Is it about being consistent? Is it about all those things? But identifying this clearly is critical. Another key mistake is just expecting the team to see the bigger picture automatically. If I could count on one hand, actually on many hands and toes and fingers across the nation, how many times people have said, oh, I just want my team to think more strategically. They're just so stuck in the weeds. And you kind of slap yourself with the hand on the forehead. When you're CEO, that's your job, is to think strategically and big picture. And you want your executive team to think like that because it takes the burden off you. But it doesn't happen overnight. You need to give them some skills to do that. The results mapping process is one way to do that. The shadowing is another. The showcasing each other's workplace responsibilities is a third. So don't expect them to just get it. You actually have to work at it. And the last mistake is not doing anything to build competence and or cohesion. So a lot of leaders just assume that elite teams kind of just happen on their own. No, it takes deliberate focus, deliberate intention, and deliberate cultivation. It takes active work on your part to steward the whole thing. They don't just automatically pick up and run with it. If you've got some high performers such as stars, phew, great, that takes some of the load off. Yet you need to cultivate them if they are to become an elite team. All right, so here I have some homework for you and also a special offer. My special offer is a free book, People Stuff, which won Business Book of the Year last year. I'm down to my last box of books in this print run. I have asked the printer to do another print run. So after I won the award, they sent me a bunch of stickers to put on the original book. 500 stickers. And now I'm down to my last box. And I want them off the shelves while I wait for my next shipment to come in. So you have until Friday. If you want a free copy of the book, just email me, zoe@zoerouth.com, with People Stuff in the subject line. Please include your postal address so that I can post this off to you as a gift for you. Only 20, first in, best dressed, or until the box is gone. So if that's you, off you toddle. And what do I put in there? Here we go. Here's your homework. Your leadership fundamentals. This is an assessment I'll send through to you. How good are your skills and your team skills? It's a quick checklist. Same thing with this one. Advanced leadership skills. Where are they now? And a third thing is plan a culture cohesion event. No matter where you are on the journey to elite teams, this will serve you in such good stead. Absolutely. Okay. I think that's it from the slides point of view. Let's stop sharing there. Phew. Make sure I covered off on all of that. Okay. Now, what would you like to know? What would you like to share based on the journey here? Does anything need clarifying? If you'd like to ask a question, you can either do it in the chat box or you can unmute yourself, speak away. Please go for it. I'm going to put you in gallery view so I can see folks. What would you like to know? What would you like to share? Megan, I love your background. That beautiful blue art is just gorgeous, by the way. And Becky, I love your background too. That looks like the Three Sisters in Blue Mountains. It's just beautiful.
Hi, Zoe, how are you? It's Joe.
Joe. Awesome.
Yeah, just a quick one. I just wondering what a culture event looks like in your eyes, like a culture cohesion event.
Yeah.
I mean, we have different team building days and where we present strategy and we try and build that cohesion and introduce some fun and this type of stuff. But, you know, it doesn't seem to hit the spot sometimes with the group. So, yeah, I just wonder what your thoughts are, what it looks like.
We'll definitely tell you my ideas. Let me ask you this question. What fell short for you? Like, what was the kind of thing you tried and went, bleh?
I think when we presented, we talk about the strategy and what we want to do. And when you get into the mechanics of what the organisation is doing, they're sort of like the interests sort of, I'm just an opinion really, that it looked like it wanes in the room when you start talking about the strategy, as you mentioned earlier, you know, when, you know, we want that team to understand where the organisation wants to go, but how do we know that they're actually understanding the real dynamics behind it or why, you know, behind it. So
okay, that's a perfect candidate for doing results map, and you can do that with your team. So that crafts the picture of the organization where they sit. So often one of the mistakes we can make is like the executive, here is our strategy, da 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 da, and it's like, there, isn't everybody enlightened and enthusiastic? And little contribution means little buy-in. So that's often trying to get contributions to the strategic process or asking the question, asking them, seeding a challenge to your team is one of the ways to get them more engaged that way, which is, right, this is our strategy. How can we deliver even better results for our clients? How can we be the best performer in our sector on behalf of our clients? Like asking really exciting, challenging questions to your team members is one way to get them engaged. Instead of just delivering the answers, you can be asking questions. So that's my quick coaching response to that particular example. Now, to your question, what are some examples of culture cohesion events? A couple of examples can be simple things. It could be a morning tea on site when we can meet in person, where you do a round robin of what are you grateful for? It could be a round robin of what are you proud of in the last month of work? So sharing these pieces of little insights, and it could be work related, it could also be personally related. So doing these quick touch points, and in loyalty, I give a whole skeleton of things that you can do on a weekly basis, quarterly basis, and annual basis, and you kind of scale up the activities. So on a weekly basis, it could be quick check-ins like that. What are you focused on? What are you celebrating? What are you grateful for? What are you proud of? Simple shares like that builds an awareness and insight and intimacy and connection with others. On a quarterly basis, it might be a look forward and a look backwards. So over the last quarter, what are our key lessons? What are our key successes? What are our key failures? What have we learned from all this? So a debrief of activity is one way of building a culture/strategy cohesion piece. And looking forward, it's like, okay, how can we do better in this coming quarter? What is our focus area? What are some anticipated challenges? How can we do a pre-mortem where you imagine the worst things happening and then prevent it? So those are kind of like quarterly things. On an annual basis, it's a bit more of a big ta-da, and the focus should be on celebration. What are we celebrating these last 12 months, you know? I did this recently with my team, and I have a remote team. And it's like, wow, the last 12 months, you know, 12 months ago, we were in Canberra. It's kind of just coming out of our lockdown. We've only had one this whole time. And the state of the business, it was decimated like a lot of other businesses. And from there, this is what we've managed to accomplish in those 12 months. together as a team. Our dynamic has shifted, and these are the new clients we've put on. These are new projects we did. We got a book out. It won Book of the Year, like that kind of stuff. When you start doing that kind of celebration piece and also recognition and acknowledgement, you know, congratulations to the team members who really learned particular things and contributed in this particular way. That kind of stuff is really meaningful. And then you can go in depth. If you want to go in depth, then you do team retreats. And team retreats depends on the team. You can do high level outdoor activities. My favorite, not everybody's cup of tea, where you can take them out bush. I'm doing this for a couple of my clients in the spring, where we're going to take their teams out into the bush for 2 nights, 3 days. And we don't have a big agenda. It's like, let's get out into the fresh air. Let's get some big views. Let's sit around a campfire, check in with each other, talk about work, talk about each other, and just unwind. That's one way to do it. That's kind of advanced. You can go to the Northern Territory, where I've taken groups before as well, where you go out for 4 days and you tramp up and down mountains and you have this amazing adventure together. That's kind of like at the end of the scale. Other retreats could be, let's go away for the weekend to the Blue Mountains and have just a lovely time there, wining, dining, and just being out in a beautiful place. So those are all kind of advanced ways. Team retreat could just be a day together somewhere nice. You don't even have to do overnight stuff. But the togetherness piece, shared experience piece is the common theme there. Okay, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate it. Now, I just noticed that we have about 2 minutes to go. Are there any other burning questions that people would like answered, or anything else that people would like to contribute? Okay, so we got, everybody's feeling quite good. I would love in the chat box for you to share a key takeaway for you. So what was useful for you in the chat box? That gives me a really great insight as to what landed for you. So what was helpful for you? What was a key takeaway? And as you're doing that, I'll just do a little preview of next week's fabulous webinar, which is the nuts and bolts of elite teams. So here we did a high-level map of the journey to elite teams. Next week we go into the details, the specific practices you need to have in place to ensure collaboration and innovation, what to look for when identifying people's strengths and the conditions to leverage them, and the single most important discipline you and your team need to embrace to get anywhere close to elite teams. Plus, we do the 10 steps to getting into group flow, which is your peak creative, innovative state. That's all coming up next week. All right, so in the chat box, is there anything that you'd like to share in terms of your key takeaway? All right, results mapping for creating elite teams. Yeah, ooh, all of a sudden there's a lot of stuff. Let's have a look. Hire for a contribution to the culture, yeah. That's cool. Essential power and importance of soft elements as team building. We call them people elements as connection and cohesion. Having opportunity to identify the stage of the team. Very useful to assist next steps. Cool. Work towards redundancy in the sense of developing your team, able to function with the, it's liberating, Justin. Enjoy that one. The things that teams need, a great reminder, as well as reflection on the past achievements. Culture, strategy, matrix was useful. And results mapping. Wow, fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you investing your time and energy to be here this afternoon. I hope that you are all safe and well and looking after yourselves, because this is so important. Without you, nothing. So leaders, look after yourselves. Make time to just enjoy yourselves and have a bit of fun. It doesn't always have to be so hard all the time. So let's have some fun. All right, Kelly, I'm handing back over to you.
Oh, Zoe, that was awesome. One of my favorite things is studying elite sports teams as sports psychology is part of my background. And I love looking at how we can apply those same strategies to business. And I think you've covered off on some things that really elite sports teams have, particularly around the results mapping. Everybody, we're just so glad to have you with us on this journey to create amazing teams within the social and affordable housing sector, because the work we do is super important. And I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to begin this journey. We have Zoe with us for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll look at what sort of relationship that we can have with Zoe, with our leaders across our membership, so that we can keep this going and that you can get little little tidbits along the way. Just a reminder that Zoe has a podcast, so please jump on LinkedIn and look out for that. Deborah Plowman, who's on today, just mentioned that the episodes, I think it was number 215 and 216, are pretty good. So
it's called the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, so easy to find.
Yeah, that's excellent. All right, we have recorded this and it will come out to you via a link in your email. And as always, we will be asking for your feedback as well on whether this session hit the mark for you and met your expectations. So thank you, everyone. And I want to echo Zoe's words, look after yourself, take care, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bye, everyone.